Thank you very
much. All right, our next report is the principal's report, and Art, I think you're up too. So.
Pam wanted to touch on one thing before Art, but Art definitely can come up.
Yeah, he can go. I'll just add a few things. Right.
I'll talk to you.
Okay. Are you going first?
You can go.
So what I provided you was, there's 3 different documents to just...
And I just want, before we start, I just want to let everybody know that we now have gone a little bit more high-tech now. So that is what Tim is talking about up on the screen there. And if you can't, I mean, Art is going to talk on
So what you're looking at on the screen and in front of you is a financial report that I put together for each one of our tournaments and or invites. The thing to remember with these is this is not a budget. It's not a budgeted item. It's basically a fundraiser for the athletic department. It's all out of my activity account. So what we try to do each year, we look at it and you know, we change the entry fee if we need to, so that basically when the teams pay to come to these events, they help cover the cost of the officials or workers, so the host school can, you know, obviously not lose any money. So on the left-hand side is our Thanksgiving, Boys and Girls Thanksgiving tournament, where you can see what team paid, and that's based upon if they have a varsity or a varsity and sophomore team. So what the entry fees total, the amount of money that we took for tickets or our gate revenue, and then the cost to actually run the event. From our ticket takers to our table workers, security, event supervisors, basically security, but I have them doing a different role, so that's why I call them that. And then the cost of the officials are set costs by the state of what we pay, and it depends if you're a sophomore official and you're working 2 games, or if you're a varsity official, you only work 1 game. But then, so you can see on the Thanksgiving tournament, our total revenue was just over $1,500. For our girls' holiday basketball tournament, which we were very happy with because we had a sponsor last year, which we lost, which was $1,000. So we were a little worried that we might go in the hole this year. And if I happened to go in the hole, then the boosters was going to reimburse that, but we didn't. We actually made a little over $100, which was good. But so each, like I said, each one of these events, these invites, or like tonight is our conference cheerleading, it's not a budgeted item. It's something that we charge entry fees for that pretty much will cover the cost. Then looking at previous years, you can know pretty much what you'll make at the gate, or, you know, next year we're looking at doing a few other things to raise the revenue at our gate. And then this money will just go back into the athletic activity fund to help pay for whether it be supplies, repairs, you know, like updates in the main gym for records and things like that. So that's what we do with this money.
On the conference tournaments, that just goes on a rotation. That's how.
Conference tournament, if your school can host, not all schools can host just due to space, but like for example, the cheerleading competition, we won't have that again for another 7 years. So it'll rotate, or 6 years. We just set that, like we can't host obviously indoor track right now, so there's only 2 schools that rotate that, but we can host other things. So as a conference, we determine who hosts what, and we just kind of rotate that.
We're hosting swimming next week.
Correct.
Are we charging an admission?
Yes, we charge. It's a $180 entry fee.
Yeah.
So that, like that, it's a perfect example. It's not a budgeted thing. So I will have a sheet like this. Both of our, like swim invite last week for the boys, or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Our revenue was about $400. Which was basically what we made at the gate. So you try to adjust it because you don't want schools paying you money and then making money off of them. You want it to be, you want to make your money at the gate, and that's where, you know, the entry fees pretty much will help you run the event, and that's what every school pretty much does. So it fluctuates.
Some of it has to go to IHSA though.
That's only IHSA events.
Oh, okay.
Meaning like regionals or sectionals. Right. So if we host boys regionals like we'll do for basketball,
right,
as long as you charge at the gate. If you choose not to, then you don't get any revenue. But if you charge at the gate or at the door, IHSA will pick up the cost of the officials,
right,
and then you split the gate revenue 70-30. We get 30, they get 70. So
right,
you usually make, last year for boys sectionals, I think we made a little over $2,000.
Right.
So we try to host
The second biggest expense there is the table worker. What's a table worker?
Table worker, for this example, in the main gym, you have to have 4 table workers.
What do they do?
1 for the scoreboard, 1 for the player scoreboard, 1 for the announcer, and 1 for the book. So that's a standard. You can't have less because you just can't physically do it.
Okay.
So we have 4 for each varsity for each varsity game. They get paid contractually $60 for 2 games.
Okay, their administration of the contest.
Yeah,
Okay,
and then
all
there's
right.
2 for the sophomore. So you can't, and security, I like to have 1 in the main, 1 in the east, 1 to float. So you don't really want to go below 3, and it's contractually $60, so, it's 2 contests a day over the 4-day period. So yeah, it adds up, but it's, to run the event the right way, obviously, you do this.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions for Art?
Yeah, earlier on for the summer, made you to be aware of carrying the variable cost of additional cost to the school. Are you saying Aramark did not have any more additional variable cost to hold?
No, I mean, Dr. Skinkus had talked about that. Moving forward, if we want to put a small fee on something like this, there's very little cost, like to Aramark, because after they set it up, they don't really do anything outside of maybe stopping and change the trash cans or whatever.
But
They don't-
remind me, was this a time when the school was closed?
No, because we would have been open for practices and things like that. That's what we talked about. Like, if you turn the heat off.
For Aramark.
So Aramark would
Yeah,
have been
Aramark,
working,
yeah.
there
I
was no
told him any
additional,
overtime or anything like that, he would have to cover.
so there was no
it.
additional people kept
No,
on where they could have a reduced staff during this time?
No, there's very little use of Aramark during this period because they don't have to be there. We're there, we run the event, and like as far as the lights and heating, it's going to be on in the morning for regular practices, so that maybe it's $100, I don't know. And that's something we said we'd look into if that's what we want to take a little percentage and put it into the revenue portion of the school, we can certainly do that.
What about like cleanup in the stands and everything?
Yeah, that would be something that once again, it would be a small percentage of time, but if it's something that we wanted to do, we could add
Anything we're
that.
billed extra for, Art, you need to make sure it's cost neutral to the school.
Right,
We cannot endure any extra cost to host these tournaments.
right.
All right, any other questions on the tournament breakdown?
I'd like to go to money, the 3rd sheet, before we go back to transportation, so you can get this was requested, so we stick on financial
All
somewhere.
right, so go to the 4th page of that 4-page sheet, the last page.
Yeah, so this document is, you asked, actually, I think it was a couple months ago, of just why I have the cost of the ticket takers on there of, is it worth us charging at some of these events? A little recap of, why we charge as a conference. We chose these sports to charge for, so we've just kind of been doing that. And so you have this year's fall gate receipts minus the ticket takers, and I tried to show last year's also. The reason that this year is higher is because of the booster pass would be the first reason. The games are the same. There's 4 games for football for each year, but we did not have that booster pass, so that would give us an idea, a little idea of what the booster pass revenue-wise is taking away from the general gate receipt. So the only 2 sports in the fall that we charge at the gate, outside of invites and things like that, are football and volleyball. So those are our 4 games. Next year, we have 5 home football games. So it's going to go up a little bit, or depending on what we do with booster pass or things like that, it's going to fluctuate.
Any questions on this sheet?
Could you break down the ticket, sorry, Gary,
Good.
the cost of ticket takers?
It's right there.
Ticket takers,
$60
yeah, I mean, it's
a game.
$60 an event.
Or whatever, so.
So like a football
Okay,
game,
the sport.
we have usually 2 at each station, just based on past of how many need to get people in and not have backups and things like that. Volleyball, we only have 1 per game, so it'd be $60 per game. So that's how that,
So
Yeah,
6 or 7 a game then?
6 a game, right?
60 a game contractually, that's what it,
But we have 6 ticket takers a game then?
like a
On the
football
average for
game,
football,
yes.
yeah.
Football
Okay.
game, 3 gates open,
'Cause you
2
have
at
3
each gate.
gates. the one
Okay,
that-
great.
Yeah.
Is this none of the amusement tax for Brookfield?
This does not
Football.
have that on there, but we do have it in a different account of what we had to pay this year for the amusement tax.
And since we hosted the basketball on this side of the street.
Oh, that is
doesn't
not.
apply.
right,
You don't,
does
it does not apply in that side.
Right, only the
right?
football games.
So this is not net of that tax that we had to pay, or is it?
No, because it's a different, it was.
So we
taken
would
out.
have to net this down for the amusement tax, right?
Yeah.
How much did that,
Couple $100.
okay, I just didn't know
A
what
month
that.
for 2 months.
Yeah.
Because we just
So
had it
about
for
$500
September, October, I
total?
think. Yeah.
Okay.
So now, one other question, if we want to look at all full cost exposures, do we have in here, or the next time we show this for football, I'd like to see the breakdown with, security, And then waste management, I know, because we have the outdoor toilets and that stuff like that. Be able to break that down.
What I'm going to have is, when we get into the advisory council report outs, we'll probably start talking extracurricular cost and extracurricular reductions, or possible reductions at the February cow through March, and then finalize them in April. Since there's no specific timeline, it's opposite of what the timeline is for the teachers. But what I wanted, and what Art is already working on for us, is obviously data on schools that offer activity passes. Then he's going to break down what it costs to run a home football game, what it costs to run a home basketball game, different meets, so that we can see where our expenditures are at versus any revenues that we're getting from the gate receipts and some of those things.
Art, the ticket takers, are they faculty members usually?
It's first offered to faculty. If we can't fill it union-wise to faculty, then it goes.
Because if you look at the two volleyballs, and 67% of the revenues went to the people taking the tickets, and then this year 40% of the revenue went to people taking the tickets. It's almost a question whether it's worth having somebody there, especially in the case of 70% of it is the cost of the person taking the tickets.
Yeah, I mean, that would be something that you guys could.
Are you allowed to waiver off of whether or not we charge if the conference is charging?
You
That
try
would
to
be a
be
question.
consistent, just so that it's consistent, that somebody, comes to our venue and doesn't have to pay, but then they'll
Okay.
go to another school and have to pay. You just,
I think as long as you're not losing,
Yeah, I
$589
mean, I
is
would-
a small amount.
I would rather take a couple $100s than
Yeah.
take nothing. I mean, but as a conference, we try to stay consistent, just so that it.
And Art and I talked about this a little bit, because I would, being in the building over break and seeing some of those, I asked about, hey, can we reduce insecurity or do, so he's going to put together some plans to make sure we're running a skeleton crew, but yet a crew that can provide enough supervision in the event of an emergency or in the event of something occurring.
All right, then we're going to transportation procedures for coaches. This was requested.
Yeah, so what you have in front of you is basically is the procedure that we go through every year. At the beginning of each season, the head level coaches will, check their schedule with us at athletic department, and we'll have a bus schedule, so they'll check that and make sure that it's accurate. We then submit that to the contracted bus company. On a weekly basis, they will send us back a fax and email on, this is your week events. And we'll check and make sure, because sometimes you'll have like on this past Friday, we had to cancel a game, so we canceled bus, obviously. The bus company then, gives us numbers that the coaches have. The bus company that we currently have, Illinois Bus Central, gave us 2 regular numbers and then 1 emergency number for nights and weekends. Unfortunately, what we've run into twice this year is that they have not answered that emergency number, which has, as I noted at the very bottom, we've never had that issue before. So yes, we unfortunately are scrambling to that number 5, which we've never had to do, but what we did in the situation that happened a couple weeks ago with the cheerleading, I'm talking to the coach in the morning, we're trying to call the bus company, they're not answering. All right, can we take a minibus? Well, we can't take a school minibus because the team's too big. So now we're scrambling, do we just cancel the event and not go, or do we try to get parents to help and get our kids to the event? In the example in the fall, we just had a bus not show up and we can't get everybody there, and we don't want to have parents drive, obviously, so we had to cancel that event. So what we're struggling with is that we have a bus company that is very inexpensive compared to the other ones, but
We know why.
they are very unreliable, and we talked to them, what happened? Oh, the bus driver didn't show up. Okay, so we're struggling right now.
So have
My
you
phone
pressed
didn't
them on
work.
that, though, when they said that the bus driver did not show up, and say,
Oh,
what's your backup, what's
yeah,
going on, you know what I mean?
They don't really have a backup, and that's what we unfortunately are getting stuck with this year, is that, in years past, if a bus broke down, we'd call the bus company, they'd get a bus there in 15 minutes. If a bus was running late, we'd call them, we'll be there in 20 minutes. Okay, we've never had this scenario that has occurred twice this year, and it's a scary thing to have, because you don't know if we don't want to be canceling events. It's not right. It shouldn't be something that we're worried about, but unfortunately, with this bus company, it's what we're trying to deal with always. And
So we, if I'm not mistaken, we rebid the bus company last year or the year before. We saved about approximately 40,000 in what we were spending in transportation. But we've had now 2 incidents where a bus has failed to show, and we've had trouble getting a hold of somebody. In the fall, they had trouble filling their drivers and had a clause in their contract that if they had trouble providing transportation or providing a bus for a scheduled route, that they agreed to cover, that they would offset the cost of us having to go to a third party. So we went back to Grand Prairie for several of our fall routes, who we used last year, that is more expensive, but they covered a lot of our fall extracurricular routes because the current bus company couldn't provide buses for those routes, especially during the school week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they came and said
Weekends,
that
they were better,
yeah.
but they were...
We did it on a weekly basis, though. We would contact them on a Monday and say, can you handle our trips next week, not this week, next week? And if they said no, then we just canceled all of the events with them that week, did everything with Grand Prairie, and then billed them the difference.
Now, the issue that we're working through, and that we did have the attorney submit a letter to the current bus provider, is we haven't received payment yet. So I have Tim in pursuit of, we need to start seeing some of the reimbursement payments, which are why some of those budget accounts were off in the bill statements, because we had to pay out of pocket for Grand Prairie, and then we're supposed to be getting reimbursement from this current provider.
We've submitted bills to them for $6,000, a reimbursement for $6,000.
One of the questions I'd asked was the number of events we had to go to an alternative bus or parents driving out of.
Well, we had 2 events that Art was mentioning where the bus didn't show up, and then they were scrambling to.
Yeah, and the one event we canceled, and then
Yeah.
with the latest cheerleading event, that was the only event we've actually had parents take, because we were scrambling and went to this and said, do we cancel? Do we call, and say we can't make it? We called, they could adjust our time, so then we said, all right, let's get parents to drive.
But we also, so I'm trying to get the scope of how big of a problem this is if we've had to go out and substitute buses. So what is the percentage of events that we had to go to alternatives or not show up?
We did that for 4 weeks.
We probably did it for about a month, that they said that they couldn't provide service to us, so we went to the
So
other
we took
bus
every
company.
event for those weeks and sent them to.
On the average, that's about what, 5 events a week, 7
Oh,
events?
you're probably 5 or 6 events, maybe, probably more than that.
25 events that we had to
Yeah.
use alternative transportation.
So could we get a percentage? We get a number of, I mean, what's this, how big of a scope is that? Is that 10% of the bus needs, 20% of the bus needs?
Well, what is the 2
Well-
that they didn't show up for? How many bus trips did you plan this year so far to date, and 2 they didn't show up for?
2 that didn't show up, and
How
then
many
about
were-
a month that we didn't use them because they should.
Forget the month. Of the 2, how many
I would
sporting
have to-
events did you
yeah,
have?
I'd have to go back and
That's what he
look.
wants.
But I would include the
And
ones that
then-
we already alternatively
And
knew,
then go and add the
that we had a
alternative.
plan alternative for.
Right, so can you give us a percentage of that?
Yeah, we'd have to go back and look at every single event. I mean, I could certainly do that.
Well, if you have 5 or 6
5 or
a
6.
week,
Easily.
how many weeks?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking,
Do the
yeah.
quick math and.
The rationale
Is
for
it
that is if
$40,000
a majority of the contract is
months?
being subsidized now, then why we would rebid the contract and break the contract and
absolutely.
rebid
I
that.
mean, because again, it's taken time and effort to go and alternative, and now it's going to be time and effort to try to collect monies.
There's also a bigger risk than the one you
Right.
mentioned. And that is that the bus breaks down, or is that the other place, and you said they don't have a way
And
to,
we
what are
don't
we gonna
have-
do then?
We don't have an emergency number to call.
You're gonna have
Exactly.
parents driving onto one of the interstates and picking kids off the side of the road? I mean, and that's not your fault. That's our fault, because we chose these guys, and we gotta decide how to manage them, but,
Now, one of our schools in the conference uses the same provider, but their
Yeah.
buses come out of a different barn. They come out of the western suburbs barn near Aurora, and ours come out of more,
Ours is out of the city.
they do
So
some
why
of the
can't we
CPS
switch?
routes and some of that. Well, that's what we're trying to work on with the management team. I gotta imagine for them, the cost they bid out was thinking they're coming from the Chicago location, not from Aurora to get to.
All right, so let's do this. Let's look at what percentage of incidents we have. Both total, identify, we know the 2, if there's any other ones. Identify that, what that cost was, which you already have, but just identify that. And then we as a board need to decide if we need to pursue, rebid, or work from that end, okay?
and Art, it was a little unclear to us, you have this sheet here. But, and you said, is there like some cheat sheet for every coach that has the rules and all the phone numbers they need on it?
Every coach gets it in an email. We used to do little
Okay.
cards, but we don't do the cards anymore, but they have it in their email, and I go over it
Okay.
at the coaches' meeting.
Thank you.
Okay,
So this, yeah, this is not a new one, even though it's dated the 24th. This was,
No,
everyone
this
gets
is
this
what
at the
we-
beginning of the, okay.
This is what we've done.
Yeah.
We don't have it written as specific like this. We go over it and give them numbers. This document isn't like this in the coach's handbook. We just have a procedure of bus, like, here's the bus numbers, call if you know. This is the steps that we talk about of going through.
okay. Any other questions for Art? Art, thank you very much, very good reporting.
Thank you.
Just keep us, be able to supply us with that for the bus. And then Tim, we need to work with that.
Pam, you wanted to just
Pam?
touch on one other?
Well, there were just a couple of quick things. One thing that I did want to make note of publicly is yesterday, Kevin and I got a nice donation. I thought that I would make mention that 2 women from the class of 1947 came by, and they're no longer going to be hosting any reunions, and they had money left in the reunion budget, so they donated. Mrs. Patricia Wander, who was Patricia Brunn when she attended RB, gave us a check for $1,300, which we're going to put towards student use for activities. So we wanted to publicly thank the class of 1947. So, and then we just are looking at the D&F rates at the end of the first semester. I know the board had asked some questions about, some of the changes with fewer perhaps academic support sections, and would that have an impact and how things were going with the teachers. I was heartened to hear the Student Association report that from the students' perspective, the teachers are still, working as hard as ever and as devoted to helping the kids make their academic gains and still holding standards high. Our D&F rate was the lowest it's ever been. For a combination, we had 7.3% Ds, 3.3% Fs for a combined 10.6%. And I looked at the last 10 years and averaged, and that rate was 14.3. So our interventions are still working. We think the executive functioning program is helping. We did some really targeted things with freshmen and sophomores that near the end of the semester were a team of reading, math, science teachers got together, and social workers, and looked at kids that were especially in the freshman class, and did some help with them with strategic studying, especially for exams, and that seems to have really paid off with the way kids were able to come through with stronger grades at the end. Then we also look at that relative to the standardized test scores and how they're doing to make sure that we don't have grade inflation. We're seeing really good progress. So I just wanted to let you know we're continuing to look at data like that, since you had expressed some concerns about some of the cuts and the impact on the kids' academics. So, and just a real quick note that we will be bringing many more students before you for recognition, because we just got a report today that we had a record all-time high of Scholastic Art Competition awards. 28 of our students won awards, 8 gold medalists, 11 silver medalists, and 9 honorable mentions, which is more than we've ever had at one time for RB. So we'll be bringing forth some more students, and we just wanted to give you that good news too.
Please make sure they show up though, so we can.
I will try and render them.
I'd like to get tired
Mr.
shaking
Cindy.
hands.
Tell them they can bring their art.
Trying to figure out.
These kids are busy.
Thank you,
but
Pam.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll hold pictures up of them.